It's a party and a group of young married couples are having a great time drinking and being merry. There's Alice and Jack, Bunny and Dean, and Peg and Pete. Afterwards, Alice and Jack go joyriding in the desert and cut donuts in the playa. Next morning, Alice is fixing Jack's breakfast and discussing the party that they will be hosting soon. The house starts shaking. Alice knows that it has something to do with Jack's secret work that she wants to learn more about. They live on a cul-de-sac and all the men drive to work simultaneously while the wives wave them off. The radio says that it is the Victory Project, day 987, the security level is yellow, all employees are in transit to Victory headquarters, and all residents are safe and accounted for. A stream of cars head to the Victory Project mountain in the desert. This is a weird town. Alice spends her morning cleaning their perfect house and then rides the bus to ballet classes. In class, Shelley, the instructor, introduces new employee Bill Johnson's wife, Violet, to the class. Later, Bunny is gossiping with Alice and shits on Margaret, saying Dr. Collins was at their house again and how she'd be surprised if Ted keeps his job. She shouts at her two children for having fun in the garden. Alice is cooking and finds empty eggs in her groceries. She is perplexed and accidentally burns the steak. When Jack arrives home, Alice is dutifully waiting for him with dinner on the table, but Jack wants and gets something else on the table, if you know what I mean. Alice and Bunny are chatting about kids at the community pool with Violet. Alice doesn't have or want children, but she does have an earworm and can't stop humming the tune. She briefly has a vague vision. There is a party at Frank and Shelley's home. The men are talking with Bill, the new guy. Bill asks about Frank, and Dean heaps praise on Frank and is an asshole to Bill. Shelley makes a speech to welcome Bill and Violet into the family community that Frank has built, adding that it's a better way of living. A woman named Margaret asks, "Why are we here?" and is soon escorted away by her husband Ted. Frank starts vaguely answering the question. He gets the group to chant a script that they are changing the world. He thanks Dr. Collins, who helped him build the Victory Project, and the wives and their pivotal roles. Alice notices that Jack has gone and looks for him. Alice finds Ted giving Margaret pills. Margaret says they are hiding her. Ted brushes this off and says she is fine, but she disagrees with this and says things are not fine. As Ted closes the curtain, Alice has an image flash in her mind. Alice looks in the house and finds Jack in Frank's bedroom changing his tie. Jack starts coming on to Alice and they get it on. Alice sees a pervy Frank watching and she says nothing. The women are talking and the subject of Margaret comes up. They say that she broke the rules by taking her son into the desert. He was never seen again, but Margaret says that they took him to punish her. There's another rumble from the Victory Project and Peg wonders whether they are making weapons. Bunny insinuates that they are being listened to and that they have a role to play in changing the world. Alice sees more visions creeping in. Alice is woken by a nightmare that night and she's distracted when Jack leaves to work. Frank's voice is beaming over the radio, spreading his message. Alice wants space and takes a ride on the trolley to the end of the line to get out of the house. A smoking plane flies overhead and gets weirdly distorted for a second. She sees it crash into the mountains. When the trolley driver refuses to help, she goes alone and ignores the hazardous materials warning sign. She walks through the desert to the top of the mountain where the Victory HQ is located. She touches the mirrored windows and experiences a series of surreal hallucinations with Frank's hypnotic voice before waking up back home later that night. Jack is making a pig's ear of preparing their dinner. He says that she was asleep when he arrived home. She puts the whole experience down to being a weird dream. The next morning, Alice has an incredibly weird hallucination where she is crushed by the wall, then it suddenly stops. Moments later, she gets a phone call from Margaret, who knows that she has been out there and seen it. She repeatedly says we're being lied to. Alice says she can't speak now and hangs up on her. During her ballet class, she has another hallucination and sees Margaret as her reflection. The Margaret behind the mirror starts banging her head against it. Alice screams and the whole class stops to look at her. When she looks back, she imagined it all. She starts questioning her sanity. She runs home to see Margaret standing on the roof of their house. She then slits her throat and falls. Before Alice can get to her, men in red overalls come from nowhere and grab her, dragging her away. That evening, Alice tells Jack all about it, but Jack denies what she saw, saying that Margaret is okay and at the hospital with Ted. Alice is suspicious and asks what Jack is doing at the Victory Project and what are they up to. He says you are going to jeopardize this way of life that we have together and ignores her pleas. The next day, Dr. Collins pays Alice a visit and prescribes the same medication Margaret was on. Alice notices a folder with Margaret's name on it that says security risk and takes it when he forgets his briefcase. Jack refuses the prescription, saying they will take care of it themselves, as if he knows something else is going on. When she looks at Margaret's file, it is almost completely redacted, like a Pfizer document, except where it said she refused care and was given a final warning. The Victory Project has a huge party where Alice notices Frank and Dr. Collins observing her. Shelley introduces a burlesque show and Alice starts reliving the recent past. Alice feels unsettled and asks Jack to go home, but he ignores her. Frank calls up Jack as Alice is begging to go. He then promotes Jack to the senior advisory board. Jack starts dancing for Frank. Alice, a nervous wreck, makes her way to the powder room. Bunny joins her and tries to calm her, but when Alice tells her about Margaret and going to the HQ, she gets irate and chastises Alice, saying you are just like Margaret. Alice and Jack host a party, with Frank as the guest of honor, but Bunny is a no-show. Jack's co-workers suck up to Frank. Frank tells Alice that he knows about them trying for a child and says he's sorry that Bunny didn't believe her, adding that she didn't believe Margaret, so why should anybody believe her? He says he has been waiting for a challenge and that she has pushed him, then verbally puts her in her place. At the dinner table, Alice makes sure she is facing Frank. During the meaningless small talk, Alice points out that the women in the town are from either Philadelphia, Baltimore, or Chicago. Alice goes on to say that they all have very similar memories and they only remember what they are told, and some memories are hidden. She comes straight out with it and accuses Frank of doing something to them. Frank says Alice has a curable condition like Margaret and she should take her medication. They both go at it, with Alice trying to expose Frank and the Victory Project while Frank tells everyone she is having a psychotic break. Alice is doing a great job, but Shelley sticks her oar in, bitches at Alice for jeopardizing the project, and walks out. The guests leave and Frank tells Alice he was expecting so much more from her before he leaves to speak with Jack. Jack returns and he accuses her of sabotaging the evening, which she denies and says everything she said is the truth. Frank even admitted it to her. She starts pleading with Jack for them to leave Project Victory. She insists they must leave tonight and Jack reluctantly says okay. Alice gets in the car and Jack starts apologizing, saying that he loves her. The men in red overalls appear and pull her from the car as she pleads with them. Jack cries that he is sorry as they drag her screaming from the car. She's strapped down by oddly dressed nurses and given electroshock treatment by Dr. Collins. This jerks back memories of Jack and her in another life where Jack has lost his job and Alice has to support him. She has memories of being a surgeon and returning home to an unemployed Jack who's sitting on the computer listening to Frank's voice. There's no food ready for her, the hot water is not working and Jack just wants to come onto her, but after a 30-hour shift, she just wants to go to sleep as she's back to work in 6. Jack sits up listening to Frank's sermons. At the end of the electroshock session, Dr. Collins says,
"That's better."
Jack drives Alice home in a new car and Bunny is there to meet them. Alice is back to her supposedly normal self, and Bunny is delighted. Jack lovingly touches Alice's lip, but it triggers a memory of that sensation and wakes her slightly. Alice is forgetful, so Bunny tells her what she needs to know, saying it will all come back to her. Bunny's 2 children come home from school, but now Alice is their mother and the kids treat her so. That's trippy, man. Bunny acts like she knows what's going on. The next morning everything is back to normal and Alice waves dutifully as Jack goes to work. She does the chores and attends ballet with Shelley repeating mantras to them. She is ready to welcome Jack with a drink when he arrives home. Jack goes to play a record and starts singing a song that Alice recognizes. It clicks something in her mind. She recalls a memory of being limp and being dragged. Jack is applying to the Victory Project as applicant number 426. Dr. Collins reads his information. Jack has chosen his nationality and wife and is told his responsibilities as part of the project and the consequences of breaking the rules. Jack has Alice strapped to a bed and on an IV drip. She has something attached to her eyes. Alice snaps in and out of this state. Collins says Jack has to leave the simulation every day via Victory HQ. Jack is singing the song that Alice experiences with the earworm. Jack slips on his simulation eyewear and is told there are 72 active users online. Frank's voice hypnotically guides him into the simulation. Alice recoils and drops to the ground. She tells Jack to keep away. She is pretty much awake in the simulation now and starts calling Jack psychotic, accusing him of taking her life. Jack says she was miserable and unhappy and she hated her life. She shouts back at him,
"It was my life!"
He says he gave this to her and they are lucky to be there. Jack explained that he has to leave every day to make money for them to stay there and he hates it, whereas she gets to stay there and be happy all day. He says they are perfect together in there, but she says when she went to him he made her feel like she was losing it. He begs to her and she starts entertaining the idea and then starts worrying about the other women and especially the children, which freaks her out. Jack holds onto her tighter and tighter until she can't breathe. She panics and cracks him over the head. Bunny enters the house to find Jack laying on Alice. Frank receives a phone call from Collins saying that Jack is dead. Alice tries to explain, but Bunny says she knows. Bunny tells Alice if you die in the simulation, you die in the real world, and Frank will try to kill her in the real world as she cannot be reinserted. Bunny tells her to drive to the HQ and get out. Alice incredulously asks her, "What do you mean you know?" Bunny says she is in there by choice and her children are in with her too, whereas in the real world they had accidentally died, adding she can protect them in here. Alice is confronted by the other couples outside. Light bulbs start exploding and the other women start waking up slowly. Bill says they promised this wouldn't happen while the other men tell him to shut up. Bunny comes out and shouts at Alice to leave. She speeds off, hitting Dean in the process. The men in red coveralls rush out of nowhere and take cars to chase her. She races to the HQ and is easily caught up with despite being in a vet. Collins is coming at them from the other direction, so Alice jumps on the brakes, which causes them to crash. Frank gets told the situation with Collins, and if she makes it to the HQ she is out. An upset Frank turns around and Shelley stabs him in the chest and calls him a stupid man while twisting the blade, saying it is her turn now. Alice drives to the top of the mountain but oversteers and manages to ground the vet and blocks the road. She has to run the rest. Finally reaching the building, she stands there exhausted. Jack comes from behind and holds her lovingly. She fleetingly sees them in bed together but is soon back being pursued. She runs up and touches the mirrored building. Partial memories flash and distort and then fade to black. Alice wakes up.